Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Coffee and Conversation series. We're thrilled that everyone is here to have this conversation with us this morning. My name is Dan Bromberg. I'm the Director of Academic Programs for the Carsey School of Public Policy. And we're really excited for this conversation this morning. We're going to be talking about community action programs, or CAPs. So CAPs have aided Granite Staters for decades, offering services in every area from housing to workforce development to childcare. And we're joined by three panelists today from Belknap, Merrimack counties. So we're joined by Jeanne Agri, who's the CEO of the Community Action Program in the Belknap, Merrimack County. I guess this is an incorporated CAP, right? The two counties. And we're joined by Dennis Martino, who is the board president, and we're joined by Michael Tabory, who's the chief operating officer. So we're really looking forward to a great conversation this morning. Just as a reminder for all of the folks who are with us today, you have a Q&A on the bottom, question and answer. You could drop your questions into there, and then I will do my best to share them with our panelists. Depending on if we want to hold off until the end for questions, or if they're, relevant to the topic that's currently at hand, we'll make that decision. Anyone that needs closed captioning, please know that that is enabled, and you're welcome to do that. We'll drop that information into the chat as well. So once again, welcome very much to our guests. We're thrilled to have you, and I will turn over the presentation to the three of you.
Good morning, everybody. This is Dennis Martino, and many of you know me. Some of you do, at least, I know, because this program is a joint operation between the State of New Hampshire Bureau of Education and Training and its graduates, represented here by Frank Nugent, who's the president of the New Hampshire Association of Certified Public Managers. And a number of years ago, we partnered with the Carsey School, and we're literally doing coffee and conversations. And when COVID hit, we all went to a virtual platform like this, and it's been convenient for many people who couldn't drive to a location to actually sit down and have a cup of coffee and conversation. But I wanted to start off by telling you a little bit about how the CAPs were first conceived. And I'm going to share my screen right now. This was part of President Lyndon Johnson's war on poverty. This goes back to the 1960s, and there were some major initiatives that were part of his plan to help people not only to get money into fighting poverty, but also to sort of provide for local control of how that money would be spent, with people who were board members who could actually, that came from various sectors within the community, that could actually give some advice to how the programs could be best delivered and funded, et cetera. And so some of the things were the Office of Economic Opportunity, VISTA, the Job Corps, Head Start. Many of you are familiar with Head Start. There were a number of things that were created as part of this. And one of the major aspects of it was that something that you might not be aware of, something that was called the Community Services Block Grants, were started, which meant that community action programs could be largely funded with these block grants that came from the federal government. Supporters found the programs to be very, very helpful right from the get-go. Were there critics? Of course there were. There were a lot of critics who believed that the programs cost too much and wouldn't change the climate of poverty very much. And I've added a little comment here that's a personal comment. If you asked an elderly person who gets Meals on Wheels, is this working? They probably would say yes. Or if you asked a Head Start parent whose child is making great strides, I think that they would disagree with the idea that these weren't successful. I wanted to show you, I have one more slide that I want to show you, and it comes from the Annie E. Casey Foundation. Now, many of you have heard of Annie E. Casey, the foundation, and its work with fighting childhood poverty. Here's a statistic. This is, I just pulled this off of their website literally this morning. I was mentioning to my fellow panelists yesterday that I had recently read that about 1 in 5 children in this country lived in poverty. Well, I was a little off. 18% of all children in the United States, that's like 13 million, are living in poverty. And here are, there's a federal threshold here. People living with incomes below $25,000 and change annually fall in this poverty line. And New Hampshire's no different. We're certainly not the poorest state in the country, but we have pockets where of poverty in our country. We have one of our board members in Belknap Merrimack Community Action Program is Sheriff David Croft. And one of the things that he's reported to us is that a couple of times a week in the middle of the night, he drives out to homeless camps. We have homeless people. We have people without food. We have people without heat. It's not an easy situation. I'm telling you this because that's how and why I got involved personally as a volunteer board member, which was not to be necessarily a do-gooder, but just to make sure that people were okay, that people weren't locked out of getting their needs met, that children were going to be able to eat. These may sound lofty, but what they sound to me is human. It is human for us to take care of one another. And that's how I got involved. And our panelists today, Jeanne and Michael, I'm going to turn this over to them, and they're going to be able to recount to you the scope and breadth of the programs that are offered by Community Action. And a little later on, we'll probably loop back to how can people volunteer to help? What are some things that the average citizen could do to help their local community action program? So, Michael, am I turning this over to you? All right.
Good morning. I'm Michael Tabory. I have been in the community action world for 16 years now. I came from the for-profit world. One of my running jokes was that I stopped wearing white shirts because they all had holes in the back. And I found that the nonprofit world wasn't quite so vicious. And so I joined Community Action really in a very basic role of checking files and making sure that eligibility was met and that we had done, we were remaining compliant. I moved into human resources, and from there took on the role here as deputy director and chief operating officer for one of the 5 community action agencies in the state. Community action, there's over 1,000 of these agencies nationwide. They're all independent, but we form associations within our states, and in particular in New Hampshire here. You can see from the map on the right how that is broken up by the counties. The Community Action Program, Tri-County Community Action, makes up the whole physical northern half of the state. Southwestern Community Services makes up your Cheshire and Sullivan counties. Stratford, the Community Action Partnership of Stratford County, as the name suggests, that's your Rochester, Somersworth, Dover areas. Southern New Hampshire Services makes up Hillsborough and Rockingham County, and frankly has, probably almost half of those people that are served statewide, just within those two counties. And then here at Community Action Program, Belknap Merrimack, we kind of take up that center portion of the state with both Belknap and Merrimack counties, of course, where, we know for Laconia and the Lakes region, and of course, the capital of the state. I like to talk about poverty in New Hampshire and the way we act as a safety net. People are not poor by choice. And I like to talk about and try to dispel, the myth of laziness. Many people will say, well, they're lazy, they need to get a job. And they're really missing a major factor. There are a whole lot of barriers that are preventing people in poverty from finding opportunity, from overcoming the barriers that are keeping them back. And those barriers are endless. They can be mental health, they can be medical related problems, they can be, any number of issues. A lot of those people in poverty in New Hampshire are what we call the working poor. They have jobs, they have multiple jobs, and it really is not easier to be poor than to find and make a living. An example I often give is, think of laundry. Sounds basic. I can go home and I have a washing machine and a dryer in my home. I can start a load of laundry. I can go off and I can spend time with my children. I can make dinner. I can do things around the house. Someone in poverty, think about what they're dealing with. Probably live in an apartment building, may or may not have laundry in the building. Let's say they don't. It's down on the corner. They've got to go down to the laundromat. Got to take the kids because there may not be anyone to watch them at home. And, so you got, say, 2 kids in tow. The stroller's not being used for one of the children. That's for all of the laundry, because this is a once a week transaction. And think of all the money going into those things, into the laundromat, the machines. And you wait and you sit there and, you go through and you do the laundry. And this is a long process for people. Then you have to get the kids home. You've got to feed the kids. And now it's probably time for bed. You're probably exhausted. And how much real quality time did you necessarily spend? I can go play with my kids while the laundry is being done. And that's a luxury that many of us don't recognize or see, but is part of that real difficulty in struggling with life on a day-to-day basis that the people we help deal with. It's a constant life of ever-changing crises. Every day is reaction to what is the crisis today. Is it rent? Is it heat? Is it food? Is it my kids are sick? Is it I'm sick? It's all of those pieces, and it is a constant, exhausting battle for these folks. And so where community action really comes in and steps in on a statewide basis is to help those folks who come to us identify the barriers they're dealing with and to line them up with services that can help them help themselves overcome those barriers. Now, it doesn't happen overnight. Doesn't happen with, hey, we helped you with your heat this month, you should be good to go now. It really is a long family-wide approach to overcoming poverty in each circumstance, which is unique. Poverty is caused in many different ways, and 2 of the most common that we see are, situational poverty. I was doing fine, but I lost my job, I got sick, I had health issues, and my world that I was used to came crumbling down, and I can't get back up. And then you have generational poverty. My parents were poor and their parents were poor before them. And as such, I did not have the tools or the examples or the opportunities that other people may have had. And those are the most common that we see, but there are any number of other factors that come into play. So statewide, the 5 community action agencies all have, as Dennis made a comment, to local control. We work with our local communities by doing needs assessments and working with the communities around us, be it public officials, be it business leaders, be it, you know, the private individuals who may be coming to us for our services, to help identify what are the needs in our community and where can we step up and where do we have the resources to help. So what we may see as a major factor here in Belknap and Merrimack counties may be very different than what they're dealing with, you know, up in Coos, Carroll, or Grafton counties, or, you know, Stratford County, Hillsborough County, or any of the others. So we work to develop the programs that are locally managed to serve those needs that we find where we are at, and trying to meet our clients where they're at to help them find opportunity and to be able to take advantage of that opportunity. And so some of the common programs that we all have statewide are energy assistance. Many of you have heard of fuel assistance. This is the time of year where WMUR runs a story every year about, you know, fuel assistance, it's cold out, and so forth. There's electric assistance programs where the state utilities help. There's weatherization, which helps make houses warmer. We go in, we audit houses, we test them, and we help identify the largest impact areas where they can basically save money overall on their heating, health, food, and nutrition programming. What's covered by that may vary from community action to community action. For example, here at Belknap and Merrimack, we do a lot with Meals on Wheels. You know, we do the Emergency Food Assistance Program, which is a federal food comes into the state, and we work as a state administrator to distribute that food to food pantries throughout the state of New Hampshire. Everyone thinks about the food bank. Well, the food bank does a lot of good work as well, but we're often under the radar in that we're supplying food at no cost to a large number of the food pantries throughout the state of New Hampshire. Commodity supplemental foods. We all work together statewide to help distribute that as well, and that's to seniors. And it helps give them, you know, a box of stable, you know, shelf-stable food that will help them kind of fill in the gaps food-wise that they may not be able to afford or be able to get on a regular basis. We all do housing stability and affordability programming to different degrees. You know, different agencies do more with homeless support, while others may do more with housing seniors at affordable rates to them. We all do early care and education. So we're talking things like Head Start, early Head Start, child care programming, and then some local programs that may be done elsewhere, or rather the different agencies may focus on to different degrees, are things like transportation, workforce development. Some do homeless shelters, and, you know, different varying degrees of senior services depending on where you're at. So together, as I said, you know, we kind of set a safety blanket for the state, and we find we have very strong bipartisan support, which I think is an appropriate statement today, after all, in that both parties, regardless, recognize need in people in our communities, and they recognize the community action agencies take a major burden off local community governments and tax systems. We are always the first to say, send them to us first. Let us help them first. And then what we can't meet, We work with our partners, and those partners include our town welfare offices and our other towns. And let us help first to help preserve those local resources so that the individual towns are not inadvertently overwhelmed, where we can do so much more on a broader basis. So you've probably heard enough of me talking for the moment, so I'll wrap up for now and see if either Jeanne wants to contribute something or if there's any questions out there.
Well, Michael, you did an amazing job. Thank you. Really covered a lot of the bases that I was going to kind of talk about as well. But I think one of the things that's very unique about the community, first of all, I'm Jeanne Agri, and I'm the CEO for a community action program, Belknap Merrimack. And over the last several years, my career has been with community action. I started as a teacher in Nashua and held various roles over the last 25 years within community action, being Southern New Hampshire Services, and now currently the CEO for the community action program, Belknap Merrimack. And I kind of wanted to touch upon, and Dennis talked a little bit about it as well, the uniqueness of community action as it relates to the tripartite board. Community actions, like Michael said, there's about 1,000 community actions throughout the country, and they're all set up with tripartite boards. But however, there are public and private community action agencies. So I'm speaking about the private community action agencies with the tripartite board. And which is really interesting because it's a third and a third and a third. And from local communities, a third comes from local communities, and a third comes from individuals of low income, and then a third comes from the political arena. And each of those sectors of the tripartite board really focus on engaging an active building of opportunities for participants of our services within the local community, hence the reason why we have different programming through each of the counties in New Hampshire. And it's all volunteer. And as Dennis alluded to a little earlier, there's opportunities for volunteering across all of our agencies, whether it be as part of the tripartite board or in some of our other programs. I think another uniqueness of community action program is that, and we've spoken about it a number of times, is that local building on local solutions for children, families, and participants of our program. Michael, you really touched upon a lot of things, and as well as Dennis. I didn't know if there were any questions, or as we can move into maybe a Q&A, or.
Yeah, thanks, Jeanne. So I could jump in. So there is a question just about, what it's like working for a CAP. And Jeanne, I think you touched on, volunteering opportunities, any other hiring, opportunities that you guys might have. It sounds like people are interested in learning about just, personally what it's like working for this organization.
Well, as I had mentioned before, I started as a Head Start teacher, and each of our agencies are very much grounded in the mission. And I think for me personally, that was very, very important. The mission to help support families and children and individuals with whatever activities that need to happen to help them achieve economic security. And there are many opportunities in each of our agencies, and a lot of the opportunities are posted on each one of these websites. Dennis, did you have a thought?
Well, I wanted to add something, and that is that we've been having an ongoing discussion and are launching some plans for succession planning, because our workforce, like many workforces, is well, I don't know about you, but the other night I went to bed and I had dark hair, and today it's white. And so we both from our board perspective, but also from our employees, we really want to look at, developing candidates to take a step up, because we know that people aren't going to stay with us forever, but we have an aging workforce, and that's not unusual for any organization that's been around for a while. We don't have all that much turnover. I think a lot of people might be interested. I couldn't, as a board member, say, oh yeah, well, we have openings to do this, that, or the other thing. I do know that some of the jobs, are difficult. We have everything from people who are driving buses with the Concord Area Transit, which a lot of people don't realize is run by Belknap Merrimack Community Action. Meals on Wheels deliverers. Some of the work is part-time. But we, the question about, are there, what's it like? It varies from sort of the occupational strata that you're in. I mean, there are some people that are doing very direct services, providing very direct services, and there are people who are behind the scenes providing valuable service, but not necessarily directly with individuals or their families. And so there's a wide variety. Jeanne, if I understood you correctly, you said that on these websites, there's information about job openings.
Yes, yeah,
And
there
so I
are.
think that might be a good answer for the person who asked that question. And I see that there's a couple of more questions, so I'll turn it back over to Dan here.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Dennis. So yeah, a few questions popping up. So I would love to learn more about how programs and services are marketed to the community members who could benefit. So how are you getting the word out? How do people know about all of the various things that you guys are doing for the community?
Well, I think Michael can talk a little bit about, but typically we use social media, and then we have grassroots. Our staff are out in the communities with, flyers. So it runs the gamut. We're getting a little bit more versed in social media and the different platforms within that. But a lot of our recruitment efforts are, like I had said before, grassroots, out in the community, doing presentations, meeting with local people, businesses, towns, and really just being participatory within each of our communities. Michael, did you have any more thoughts on that?
No, really. I mean, it really is. It's a word of mouth. People tell people that, oh, you need help, you get it there. And I've always told, new staff during, employee orientations that it's important that you as an employee become familiar with all the programs that we provide. So that when someone comes in for one service, you can help share with them the other services that they may qualify for that are going to have an impact on their lives. But additionally, we all have neighbors, possibly family members, who are in need, and we need to be talking to them. And that really has historically been how community action benefits and services have been communicated since the inception of these programs.
I think one of the other things that each of the agencies are making a conscious effort is that community action, as Michael had said, is a safety net, and we have various programs. I mean, just our agency alone has 70 different programs and services that we can offer depending on the situation. So what we're like I said, what we're making a conscious effort is that putting our name out there, Community Action Program, Belknap Merrimack, and other agencies are because people recognize WIC, people recognize Head Start, people recognize fuel assistance, people recognize, oh, there's an electric assistance program that I can apply for. Well, that's under the umbrella of a larger agency. So I think we're really making a conscious effort to put our names out there first and then talk about our programs and services. And you can tell I'm a little bit, I love my hand motions. I think my hands are all over the place. Get animated.
Thank you. That's very helpful, both of you. A question related to funding, and I'll try to pair these two questions together as they're related. So kind of the general question of where does CAP receive their funding, but then more specifically, is funding distributed on a program basis, or is this kind of overall CAP funding and then you have discretion as to how you use it? And then just related to that, did the NH CAPs receive any more funding either from some federal efforts? So I have Justice 40 here, ARPA, any of the new federal investments during the pandemic potentially. So two of those questions, if you want to tackle that, maybe Michael, that makes sense for you.
Sure. So the majority of our funding, probably depending on the agency, runs anywhere from 80 to 90% probably federal funding. And it's very prescribed and program specific. So for example, Head Start gets a chunk of money to work with each year, and that money can't be used for Meals on Wheels. That money has to only be used in those programs, which is one of the struggles really that all of the agencies deal with, is how prescribed that funding is and where it must be used. And we're all very closely monitored, both federally, locally, and with audits. So there isn't necessarily a lot of flexibility on what you can do with those funding streams. Now, we also receive money locally from the state level. Some of the funds come from the federal level through the state first, and then are subcontracted to the community action agencies. There is some actual state money that goes to support different programs, and local communities. Depending on the agency, we in Belknap Merrimack rely very heavily on the ability of local communities to donate to our services to help leverage greater services into their communities. And it plays a very important part. And then, of course, for many of us agencies, private donations are a real major factor in our ability to have flexibility, to start new programming, or to sustain some of those programs that may be underfunded. And it happens. The funds that come through don't really meet the cost. And today, with the increasing cost to employ someone between benefits, the competitive nature of salaries out there, it's a real struggle to be able to hire the quantity of staff at living wages and sustain it over the long term. So, you give me an excellent opportunity to put in a plug and say, hey, if you would like to donate to your local community action agency, go to the website you see at the bottom, which is www.capnh.org. And from there, you can select your community action agency and go, and they all should have a donate opportunity somewhere on their page. You can say, I really want to give this money to Meals on Wheels. Or you can say, you know what, I'd like you to decide where you need to use that money. And that kind of funding is really critical to, I know, our operations in Belknap and Merrimack counties, and I know the other agencies typically find that very beneficial as well. There was a question in there about some of the other funding. Did we receive extra funding? And I would say through, a lot of the COVID relief funds, yes, community action agencies did see a lot more money come through. Again, the misconception is that, oh, they're flush with cash. No, that money's going somewhere very specific. Emergency rental assistance was a very good example of that. We saw a tremendous amount, and I think Jeanne has some specific numbers on how much money the community action agencies helped put forward into the local economies to support both tenants and the landlords who weren't getting their rent during COVID, to help sustain that market during these difficult times. But I know that probably had close to a 20% increase in the funding we saw in our agency just over the last year or so.
Dennis, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, when we're talking about these fiscal things, as a board member, I know that Jeanne and Michael will probably bite their lips so they don't sort of chuckle about this, but we have some board members who are really, really honed in on what does it mean? What are our responsibilities with this money? How are we going to be audited? Particularly for the money that came in for COVID relief issues. There was I don't want to say it came with strings. It's because it's certainly manageable and understandable that there would be oversight for how we're going to be using this money. But one of the things that on one level we kind of chuckle about, but on another level, I'm happy to see that we have board members that are really tuned into that. They want to make sure that our programs are successful by making sure that we're financially responsible and that we're using anything that comes into us from whatever source for the right reasons, and we are doing the due diligence with reporting, et cetera. So that's another thing that I like about being a board member. We have some people I've gotten to work with, had the opportunity to work with people who are really responsible and have warm, open hearts, but are wanting to make sure that we are following the rules and regulations so that we continue to do that good work.
To follow up with, thank you, Dennis. To follow up with what Michael had said, for the New Hampshire Emergency Rental Assistance, we provided over $239 million into the communities throughout New Hampshire. It's a lot of rental assistance, $239 million. So, and then it is interesting to note that obviously with what's happening with our energy costs, that our appointments, our fuel appointments that we have seen throughout over the last several weeks is, well, tripled almost. We have seen 9,600, we have scheduled 9,619 appointments, where at this time last year, they were 3,554 appointments. So the impact that we have within the community is great and much needed.
Thanks, Jeanne. So to kind of speak about that a little bit, about impact on community, there's also a question online that I'm going to get to in a second, but I'm curious if you could talk a bit more about your relationship with various, government entities, whether it be kind of municipality or city level, county level, or state level. What does that relationship look like? Is there a conversation that you're having that says, look, we could handle this through our budget. This is something that we're taking care of. So I'm just curious about that. And I would imagine that looks different at the state, versus local level. But if one of you could talk about that, that would be helpful.
I think, Dan, what you had said, and Michael can chime in, but just as an overview, it is different with each of our community action agencies. However, I can say that we work very closely with our cities and towns and welfare officers within each of our communities, among other services with each of the towns that. And like Michael had said as well, we work and rely on the town funding to help support the services that we provide in each of our areas. And Michael, you can jump in.
You know, I think that relationship varies, again, from community to community. The local welfare officers, they have our number. They refer to us all the time. Countywide, again, this may vary depending on the agency. Our experience here is that, you know, both Belknap and Merrimack counties are supportive of what we do, and they help provide, you know, I guess a good example is with transportation. There is a good amount of in-kind financial support coming from each of those counties to help provide transportation services either to, you know, whoever is standing at the bus stop, or the on-demand services, which in many cases are our seniors who may not have as easy access. And so we couldn't make that happen necessarily without that local community support from the counties or from, you know, the cities. The city of Concord is a very strong supporter and provides, you know, a healthy amount of funding. A lot of the funding that we get doesn't say, okay, here, your costs are 100% paid. For example, with the Concord Area Transit, the federal money that comes in says, okay, we'll pay 80% of your direct costs. Management of the program will pay 50%. You have to come up with the rest of that money. Where does that come from? That comes from, you know, the counties, the local cities, and in some cases, you know, the donations or, you know, prior to COVID, some of the fares that people would pay. During COVID, we've been able to go fare free, and we hope to be able to continue to do so. But I do digress. But it really is a partnership between the agencies, the individual towns, the counties, and statewide. We work very closely through, you know, different entities or partners with, you know, the state government, you know, the governor's office and the legislature. You know, recently the legislature and the governor teamed up for a special additional electric and fuel assistance for people who are over the normal threshold. And they've asked Community Action, since we are involved and know how to distribute and deliver those funds, to help get that money out to those individuals. So it really is critical that the partnership that we have continue to be healthy, and that happens through communication.
Yeah, great. That's very helpful. There's a question posted from one of our listeners here. Are you connected with Unite Us? And if so, what has been your experience? I wasn't sure what Unite Us is, but it looks like it's a statewide coordinated care network. So I don't know if that's something that's familiar to either of you or Dennis. And if so, what that experience has been.
Well, we partner with Unite Us through a referral system. We provide our information to Unite Us, but each of our programs have their own software that we use to collect and capture participant information and outcomes. But we certainly do partner with Unite Us by providing our information and various services, various referrals throughout each of our areas.
Thank you. And then just a question that's kind of been swirling around that I have. So Michael, you kind of made reference to the the laundry example that you kind of gave it in the beginning of the talk, which I found, really helpful in helping to paint this this picture. So I'll kind of ask a question that, maybe you have some flexibility or not, but to some degree, what the implication is that, look, there are wraparound services that need to be provided for individuals, right? There are services that are going to touch on any number of people's lives. And this is just one example of how it affects the day-to-day. So could you connect some of the dots for us, as far as you said, this, you might do a community-wide needs assessment to really get a sense of what the community needs. But you're also working within a realm of kind of restricted funding, right? Targeted funding that is specific to specific programs. So how do you think about this and addressing kind of the whole person and all of their needs within the constraints that you have from a budget perspective? Just making those balances.
It really is about partnerships. We can't be standalone islands. We can't be competitive and say this is our territory. It's really about working with that individual or family or community, really, and how do we tie them not just to our services. Yes, we have 70 programs or services available, plus or minus, but it's the other charitable organizations, the religious organizations, the local town welfares. That's how, the only way you can really do it, because we all have areas of expertise. We all have areas where our funding can go because it is restrictive, but we can't and don't do it all. I make a reference that the needs assessments always come up with, a few of the regular top hitters as to what's needed in our communities or what are the problems in our communities. Crime always shows up. Drugs and homelessness always show up. Transportation, rural New Hampshire, always shows up. Well, we don't do specifically direct substance abuse counseling. It's not our area of expertise. It is not where we have resources, but we have partners. And so we will work with those same participants to help them find the services with the partner, but to offer, as you said, those wraparound services that can help them focus on their treatment and not worry as much about maybe the heat or, how am I going to get to, be it work or services or treatment or whatnot. So we will help them line up through referrals to other partner agencies to help provide them with that laundry list of services they may need that helps them move forward.
And I just want to jump in because it really is a whole family approach. There's no wrong door how you enter into our agencies. We're working, and each of our agencies are working very hard to train staff and to look at individuals and families that come into as a whole approach, and recognizing that we're not expertise in all of the areas that these families and children and individuals may have, and we're comfortable in making referrals to who the experts are, but really approaching it as a whole family situation. It's not an individual with one little issue. It's a whole family that we're going to wrap all of our services, whether it be our individual services and programs or what's out there in the community. Dennis?
Yeah, I wanted to go back to something Michael had mentioned about the working poor and somebody having to do their laundry. Our board, again, I'm looking at this as a board member, and from that perspective, our board has people who are part of the impoverished community. We have board members that are very, very low income. And one of our board members, a relatively new one, mentioned at a recent meeting how long it took her to go across town using the CAT, the Concord Area Transit, to do some errands and go to a doctor's visit, etc. And her round trip for something that should have taken about for the average person who could get in a car and drive, it took her 4 hours to go to an appointment. Now, if we weren't partnering with people, I mean, I guess my point is we can't solve all the problems. Was she able to make her appointment? Yes. Was it easy? No. And there's only, we live in a rural state. We don't have a bus stop on every corner in Concord. And certainly if you get out of the cities and into the rural areas, we don't, we just don't have the wherewithal to do it. So when we're doing a community assessment, we can't let our reach exceed our grasp, I guess, right? We have to realize that, yes, we've recognized the need, but here's what we're going to be able to do. And we keep on pushing the envelope as best we can. But again, as Michael said, without partnering with other groups, all of us would fail. So we really count on each other in that respect. And Michael's comment about just going out to do your laundry. The working poor have it's stacked up against them. They just don't have the wherewithal for the average person. Something that would be relatively easy, maybe a nuisance like doing your laundry, but or going to an appointment. But they just don't have the wherewithal to do it with ease. They have to do a lot of planning just to get minimal things accomplished during the course of a day. And anyway, I just wanted to add that Dan, your question is very, very important. How we plan for things is constant. And then you have things like COVID that you couldn't have planned for. Right. So.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis. That's really helpful. And I think sharing this information and painting this picture so people have a better sense is really something that we're able to do to help people understand this. So Jeanne, Michael, and Dennis, I'm looking at the time and I'm not seeing any questions in the box below. So I'm just curious if there's anything else that any of you would like to add. That you could close this out, and then I could jump back in again, but I'll turn it over to one of you if you'd like to say any more.
I always have something to say. I have been a proponent of looking at organizations like Community Action who are working generally with public money and saying Jeanne is a public administrator and Michael is a public administrator. And Dan and I are both ASPA members, which is the American Society for Public Administration. And I think it goes, I think that the average person doesn't realize how broad the scope of public administration is, or how broad the scope of human service public administration is. I'm also involved with the National Organization for Human Services, and most of these folks are most of the folks that are members of that organization are working in the area of public delivery. And I see, in fact, I was looking at some of the people who are participating in the program today, not as panelists, but attendees. And I recognize some of the names of people that I know work in this area. And I guess it's important to know that in some ways, the more we can link arms with one another and make those connections with one another, the better off we'll be. And so that was just one of the things that I keep on beating the drum to make it known to the average person that folks working in public administration are doing really tremendous work, and that includes the nonprofit sector as well as the public sector.
I think we put up, capnewhampshire.org, and I would invite people to take a look at that to see what kinds of other information is available on that website and connection to your local community action agency, for just general knowledge or volunteering or donating. Can't forget that. Michael?
I guess I want to thank everyone for their time and showing
Yeah.
an interest in what we do. You talked about how do we market. This is one of those ways. It's
Yeah.
through hopefully communication that we get the word out about what we do, and hopefully people will share information that they found, share the website, and share the importance of, if you're thinking during the holiday seasons of where do you want to make a donation, where to contribute, please consider giving to community action.
Thank you so much to all three of you. We really appreciate you spending your time with us this morning. So just a reminder for everyone out there, Coffee and Conversations is a discussion series jointly organized by the Carsey School of Public Policy, the State of New Hampshire Bureau of Education and Training, and the New Hampshire Association of Certified Public Managers to engage public service professionals in learning, problem solving, and collaboration. We're thrilled to host this. We love doing this the second Wednesday of every month. Next month, we will be inviting Professors Dante Scala and Andy Smith to make sense of what happened last night and what's going to come in the next few weeks. So understanding the election results. And we're going to have a full program coming out for January through June as well. So once again, thank you to everyone for coming, and let me just thank the folks that are behind the scenes. So Laurel Lloyd, Bailey Schott, and Frank Nugent, who are all part of this conversation. So, and thank you to everyone else who joined us this morning.